Well, so far, the US has explicitly identified Hong Kong and China as locations for Iranian shadow networks. It says, for example, that Chinese institutions helped Iran to procure lab equipment, that it helped to facilitate shipping and transport. And the US has named 4 Chinese individuals and about 5 Chinese institutions, logistics and supply chain companies, as being affected by these immediate sanctions. What it has not done is named any major Chinese banking or financial institutions or announced any blanket sanctions on China as a whole. What it is doing is putting China's financial system and oil system on notice and creating the legal frameworks in order to be able to hit Beijing harder. Obviously, Washington has Beijing in its sights, as Beijing buys about 80% of Iran's shipped crude oil. Now, whether this is going to affect the meeting between Xi Jinping and Trump coming up later in September really depends on how hard Washington intends to hit Beijing with these measures. Scott Bessent has said that it wants Beijing to get with the program, that no country is beyond the reach of US sanctions. However, the Trump administration also hasn't shown any major appetite to create a big confrontation with Beijing ahead of this meeting between those two leaders. And Beijing has responded by saying that it rejects these sanctions as illicit sanctions that have no basis in international law. And China says it also intends to defend its own institutions and their legitimate rights. Now, however, if the US does push China harder, if it does do something dramatic like exclude China from the US financial system, I think Beijing simply could just cancel this meeting between the leaders, because Beijing is sensitive to portraying China or Xi Jinping as weak or as being the losing party. However, I think Beijing is keen for this meeting to go ahead because it is wanting to maintain this trade truce with the US, maintain a stable diplomatic relationship with Washington, and I think Washington in turn wants to keep Chinese rare earths flowing into the US.